welcome back to Banger Broadcast episode, I already messed up, episode 6. So this one is a rap map, and this is kind of a new segment that we've been talking about for a little bit. Basically, we're going to go through and make like a starting 5 little fantasy roster almost of the most influential rappers in a certain rap style. So we're starting with LA. We got like a Lakers themed background here, but for those on Spotify, it's just purple and yellow camo pretty much. But we're going to do the same thing with like Atlanta, with New York, with Chicago, like with different areas that have just kind of like had their own sound come up, and that really kind of like cultivates this new chapter of rap. And me and Eric were talking about this. We thought this would be the hardest one. I think there's a lot more clear-cut picks in LA. And I mean, again, this is open for rebuttal, but I think New York might actually be harder. But I wanted to start with LA because I thought it was like, it's got to be one of the most unique sounds that we know of. And so just kind of like taking over with LA, showing how that spawned and how it's kind of like carried over into modern era right now. The other really cool thing about Rap Map is just like, we're going to dig into some 80s, some 90s and that era of rap when it was kind of spawning. But at this point, me and Eric, I mean, we're 20 right now. He's 21. So, I mean, we're kind of like historians, not that we like were here when it was happening or not that we saw firsthand, but Jesus, it just got sunny. More just like kind of like from what we know, from what we've seen, from what we've heard, and kind of the stories that we've learned as people who didn't live through that era. It's just kind of like our take on it. So I think we got enough knowledge to go ahead and start a top 5 roster here, but that's pretty much it. The other thing I just want to like throw out there is kind of just establishing the definition of what LA sounds like. So, I mean, for me, I think LA rap is a lot more about storytelling. Like it's really more about realism and not so much just like rhyming stuff to rhyme. I feel like early stage New York rap, like you could make a hit song and half the rap could just be like listing neighborhoods that are in your general area, and it's just a hit. But in LA, it was a lot more like not even soulful, maybe soulful, but like it was just different. It was like just real experiences, and then you kind of just like at some point people were just in this wave, but you just basically rap a song about what you did yesterday, and it's a new hit single. So I mean, everything's a little bit different, but that's definitely how it kind of like spawned at the beginning. Eric, any other comments on what you think?
Yeah, for me, when I think of Los Angeles, I just think it has such like a recognizable sound that you can hear a song and you can just know that like it's from an LA based artist. Not saying you can't hear it from like an artist from New York. You can't be like, oh yeah, that's a New York artist, or like Atlanta, like you said, or Chicago.
Right.
But I think LA is probably the most like recognizable. Like I don't know why there's just a certain sound you hear and you're like, oh yeah, that's it.
It's hard to explain because it's not necessarily more rhythmic. I mean, it's definitely it has its own jive to it, but it's like anytime you hear something, especially in like 90s era, you almost just imagine palm trees around you for no particular reason. It just kind of like it's just the imagery it creates.
And I think a lot of it's due to like Dr. Dre producing for a lot of these
Mhm.
artists in here.
And
So
I'm
we'll
not going
get
to act
into
like
said
I
artists.
right. I don't get LA at all. I lived there for a tiny bit last summer, but even just to hear songs now, even like songs from the 90s, like I said, kind of similar to New York rap. It's like you just have a bar throwing around street names. You just talk about a street that you were driving down, and I'm like, oh, I was on that street that one time. Yeah, I feel it. So it's just kind of like it's funny how it kind of connects people with. I mean, that's definitely part of it. Just kind of being from the area, or even just understanding. But then even more so, like from people from the Midwest, like me and Eric, like we don't really understand the LA culture, like the people who are rapping about it, but we still kind of you get the gist because they're like I said, it's so clear and vivid how they're able to tell stories. And all right, I'm gonna dive into some names. I think we have a couple clear standouts here. And
We
going
can go
into that,
through all the nominations.
I don't even there's probably so many we left off on like a nomination level. Let's just anchor in like the clear standouts, and then from there we can debate like those last couple. But I was gonna say
All right.
like so in terms of storytelling, like I think Kendrick Lamar is absolutely number one. And it's like I said, I'm not gonna tailor this to rap that me and Eric know about more because it's more modern. But like Kendrick, he took that whole new chapter from like the LA storytelling vibe and then just brought it into like the modern sound that we know today. And I think
And
even now he what
yeah, and elevated it to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely like a pioneer to a certain extent. I mean, it's all the sound and the same kind of fundamentals that you had heard for the past decades, but like I said, he's transcending into a new era. So it's like you're bringing this whole new sound with you. And I think he really just brought the entire game on his back when he started coming onto the scene. And I mean, like in terms of like national recognition, nobody has it like Kendrick, honestly. And I think like from what he's been able to do, from his young career and kind of just carry that over so many, top albums over the past decade. I mean, and the thing I love about it most is he has the strong roots there. Like everything he says is still storytelling. He just has new
Yeah.
twists. Some things are modern, some things are like sometimes he's more lyrical, sometimes it could be more of a song. But everything he does is still just like really falling back to the roots of LA rap. And I mean, there's no better clear example for like LA sound than what Kendrick's been able to do over the past couple decades. Gosh dang it. I don't even know if I can. Yep, can't edit that. All right, so there we go. I'm just going to go on wide view for this.
And about Kendrick, I think you can hear the LA influence probably the most, in my opinion, in A Good Kid, Mad City. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Oh yeah, like that's the
I
one
think
where
that's where you hear it the most.
as the album concept, it was just literally taking us through. That's one of those things where it was broken out. I forget if it was like over a 2-day time period, but I mean most of it was just kind of like this clear cut storyline that you could follow. And with all the interludes, with all the phone calls and stuff like that, it's literally just
Yeah.
like you're just hearing this kid live his life. And like I said, it could have been in the '90s. It was like you'll make one song like "Boys in the Hood," for example, by Eazy-E. It was just one song, but he was just kind of like literally just talking through a day. 6 in the Morning by Ice-T. He was just saying what happened to him in a day. But
Yeah.
Kendrick kind of took that and not so much about like 6 in the morning, squeaking across the bathroom in my fresh Adidas sneaks. It was like a more realistic, like, oh no, this is what happened to me in my neighborhood on these couple days. Like I had this full out gang violence shootout with you know, my brother getting killed, with like, everything that happened with the car, with Shireen. Like it was just, more realistic. It's not like romanticizing the culture of it. But then yeah, each song in the album just like broke down into this completely different like little mini scope of LA rap. But I mean, yeah, not much you can say about that. Like Kendrick is definitely a top
Lock.
contender. I mean, the next name I'm gonna go with is Tupac.
Yeah.
Again, just kind of like a undeniable like pinnacle of LA rap. And I don't know, like Tupac for anything earlier than 2000, Tupac's definitely my favorite. Just in terms of hits, in terms of content, in terms of everything he was able to do as a solo artist. And again, I think he lived that kind of life where he could tell it. It doesn't matter how many songs he puts out. It could be the same thing. It could be different. And every time he makes a new song, it's just like you get a brand new scope of what was going on.
Yeah.
Especially after him in prison, like it was just this whole new time of reflection where, I mean, All Eyes on Me came out, and it was a completely new chapter. And I think everybody has their keynote albums of what developed a sound, and I think like Tupac's All Eyes on Me was one of the best records to ever come about. And again, it's one of those things like 20, 40 years from now, it's still going to be like that was a record that changed LA rap forever. Um, I mean, I don't know if you have any other thoughts, but I mean, definitely a shoe in.
No, yeah, a shoe-in for sure. And there's a reason he's still considered one of the best rappers of all time, even like almost 20 years after his death.
And
Um,
the other thing I was gonna say, you can finish, but like it's crazy because some people are like angered to LA in a way, but Tupac was crazy because again, on a national scale, like you hear his name in so many New York raps. It's crazy just because of like everything that went on between his relationships. It was like you could be listening to something by Biggie or Nas or 50 Cent even had the whole bar from Many Men, and it was just like you're listening to a completely different side of the country at different time frames. Like this guy is coming up in every song. It's just funny that he was able to like be such a staple throughout rap, not just LA rap.
yeah, he transcended from being just an LA rapper to like just a rap icon in general and a
Right.
legend.
All right. For a third pick, and I mean, we strayed away from like my original idea for Rat Map was like, oh, what if the starting five roster had like a position tied to it, like a basketball roster. I don't want to get too messy with those details, but this next guy, I think he's kind of like the center. If you could make a center on this rap roster, Snoop Dogg. I
It's
think
not just
Snoop
because
Dogg.
he's tall.
Yeah, not just because he's tall, but like I mean, Snoop was another one where he crossed over so many different tiers. I mean, like he had his debuts as a youngster with Doggy Style, and like I'm not gonna cap. Like I didn't catch on to Doggy Style, and I think that is one that people will tell you aside from like All Eyes on Me, where I think anybody could get behind it, or aside from a Kendrick album, Doggy Style was like I think if you were in LA at that time, it's probably a top 3 album of all time for most LA residents, because it was a lot more real. But again, this was something that like, especially when I came across Doggy Style and started listening it to it in full, and as like a teenager, like I didn't get it. I didn't understand anything he was talking about. Like that's not me. That's not my life. And there's obviously those songs that anybody could kind of get behind. But I think there was a certain level of like nostalgia for most people who heard this for the first time, or for people who were like, there who were in the time frame of Snoop Dogg. But beyond Doggy Style, like beyond having a pinnacle album like that, he's again one of those guys. He's transcended decades now. He's transcended century of rap,
Yeah.
going from the late '90s and still being prolific today, still performing at the Super Bowl halftime today, and getting millions of people out of their seat. But then the other thing I want to bring up is just everything that he's done with collaboration. Every album that he's been on with Dr. Dre, everything he's done with even with Tupac, like working through different regions. Like he's been on songs with like Eminem, stuff like that. And I think the just to be able to be that versatile, that's why I think like he's kind of got like the title of center. And then as he gets into more collaboration in LA specifically with the uprising of like G Funk, like that was G Funk is almost its own category outside of LA rap because it was just such a new innovative chapter. So what Snoop was able to do, being another pioneer of G Funk and like kind of just carrying from the sounds we knew in like 1980s LA, bringing it up through his solo career in the 90s, and just like punctuating with everything he did with collaboration. I think again, it was just like
something else I want to touch on for Snoop Dogg is that his like fame has transcended just not being a rap artist, but he's like a pop culture icon right now.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like doing collabs with Martha Stewart, being in like so many commercials. I mean, some might call him a sellout for that, but I think it's pretty cool that he was able to, I don't know, turn what could have been like a good like 10-year career into a lifelong career as like a like I said, pop culture icon.
If I had to pick any one of these guys to be like a 1 year, 5 year, just like off the map after that, you would have thought Snoop Dogg. You would have thought, and it's just so far from the truth. Like even the Corona commercials, it just has such an aura, and it's hilarious. But also like I said, it's the truth because that's his style, and he has not wavered from the age of 18 from his style. He doesn't really change that much. And I think that's so important into keeping the roots of LA rap. Like he hasn't, even Kendrick has changed a little bit, and damn, I mean, I'll call it a storytelling album, and definitely was a storytelling album, but it's a different sound than what you would have heard in 2011, 2013. So to see kind of like that evolvement over a short period of time with Kendrick, and then you look at Snoop Dogg, like it's 30 years later, he would say the same stuff. And what you were saying about the pop culture side of things, like I think the funniest thing is him in the Bic commercials where they're showing like all the ways like Bic lighters are so good for everything. You could light a candle or light a grill, and he's just like sitting there. But every time you think he's gonna say something about like sparking his joint, and it's just hilarious that they're aware of it too. They know like this guy has spent the past 30 years using our lighters for going through probably what adds up to be like close to a ton of weed. Close to a metric ton, not an exact.
Quite literally.
Like a literal ton of blazing marijuana, and he's just on this commercial lighting candles, and I couldn't love it more. All right, so we got 2 spots left, and this is like a very key theme that we're gonna kind of blur the line on a little bit over the next rap maps. But what defines a group's prolificness from an individual artist's prolificness? So people I want to mention right now are NWA, and I do think NWA has to have their own spot here. But then from there, I mean, each member of NWA was pretty phenomenal in what they were able to do to transcend rap. So I mean, if you're cool with it, Eric, I think a vote for a spot for NWA is kind of a no-brainer. I think they have to,
Yeah,
and
of
then we can
course.
discuss that last individual spot. But
I was gonna tell you, put them in there already.
all right, well then, so NWA is definitely going to be another. I mean, I don't even know if I could mark a position here. Yeah, I'm not going to mark a position. They're power forward, but like anything that NWA did was, again, it was like each thing they did was the first of its kind, and I'm not kidding by that. Like they were going into a new era of rap, so I think that late '80s period was just so drastically different than anything you've heard. And I mean, there's a Netflix doc on it, and they talk about like in LA, there wasn't an LA sound. This had nothing, like NWA was not doing anything that had been done before. Beforehand, it was like techno, and it was just DJs at the club. Like that was the sound. And even if you watch the movie Straight Outta Compton, like how they all kind of came up. Like Dre had a pretty great, for anybody who was in the music scene in LA, you would have considered him quite a success story. He was DJing at clubs, he was MCing, like all that kind of stuff. That was LA sound. And so when they got the opportunity to work as a group, when they put together like a cohesive group and started writing with like the individual lyrics, but then also with Ice Cube as the huge backing there, it was just like even they were thinking like, why the hell are we doing this? I've been emceeing clubs for a couple of years now, and it's a sweet gig. It was like, who would have thought to do this kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think like again, just having like the culture of group rap instead of a solo artist, that was itself that itself was like a huge thing. I think people have established like certain rap groups to be necessary in areas like whether it's G Funk in LA again at a later time, or even just having stuff like Wu Tang, like obviously Wu Tang in New
Yeah,
York.
I was literally about to say Wu Tang.
I know, and it's crazy because they were all, again, any one of them could have been perfect on their own, but when you make that huge group, like, and that's just what makes the album so good. What makes the song so good is like you get a bar and you literally just pass the mic. It was like it felt like you're in this group environment, and so I think that was another like key point to kind of recognize in the late '80s here, and it kind of showed what group careers could do outside of just the individual careers. But I mean, like I said, they were doing things and saying things that nobody ever thought to say. And so I think like when they kind of took the wheel again, it opened up a new chapter. And like when they made the song "Fuck the Police," it was like people were literally like even rappers were sitting there like, wait, we can say that, and then
Yeah.
it was like it was this whole new vibe and everything they did straight out of Compton. Just like again, even I think it was so different from a song you would hear before them. You could talk about a street, you could talk about your neighborhood, you could talk about LA, but they said like straight out of Compton, and then everybody, in a certain zip code was like, that is me, that is us. This is a new wave, like this is a new movement. So I think it's even just like heightened that new level of like repping your hood kind of thing. Here, Eric, scoot out of the way. Is that easy on your background?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, just that's the thing. People were walking around with Compton hats, and like
Yeah.
that was the thing. Like, I wouldn't wear a hat that says Dayton outside. It's just like, cool, you're from Dayton. But it was like it brought this new level of like recognition. I don't know if there's a different way to say it, but just like kind of putting that city from South Central on the map, and it became so like nationwide, and I mean, I don't know. It's just really cool what they did. It's cool to like, and again, as like a historian of it, not somebody who lived through it, to go watch all these documentaries, to go like listen to the music in order, and you just kind of hear the progression. I think it was really cool.
I agree. I think you said everything that could be said.
All right, so and this is like the only tough decision. Like I said, we got Kendrick, we got Tupac, we got Snoop Dogg, and then we got NWA. And so for that fifth spot, I mean, we
I
can.
think I know what I would want there.
What do you want?
Dr. Dre as like a separate entity from
All right,
NWA.
that's valid. Before we discuss, I would like to kind of introduce all the honorable mentions, though. So, one thing that a lot of people credit LA rap to is Ice-T. And I wouldn't necessarily like put him in my top 5 of all time, but from LA, but if you're talking about the influence of it, like that's again, he was the person before NWA who was starting to kind of get its own sound, like the lowrider sound you could call it, and it just differed from club music. And he was like this new wave. I remember when he came out with like the flashy clothes, and he was just doing his own thing. It was very different than NWA, but like it was again one of those things that at least made people say like, wait a minute, there's a different way to do this. There's a different way to make music besides just mixing records together on a mix table. And I like 6 in the Morning is definitely classified as one of those pinnacle songs. But yeah, outside of that, I don't know if he's done enough early on to like be put higher than some people. Same thing with Warren G. Like you got to mention that. You got to mention Nate Dogg. And both of them had their power to kind of again transcend time periods, to transcend regions. And I think Warren G especially, again, A, being part of G Funk and transcending that group, but B, just like his ability as a producer. I mean, he was like, you could put him up there with a Kanye or a Jay-Z of that era, just to be able to be rapping and producing and creating at the level he was. Now, yeah, I'll combat that with Dr. Dre did that even better. And Dr. Dre was there every step of the way. He was in the clubs as an MC. He started NWA and was pivotal to that group. He was on the production end of things. He was on the rapping side. He had a prolific solo career. He had his collaboration with G Funk. Like it was all Dr. Dre.
And he wasn't just an 80s or 90s like icon either. He transcended through the 2000s with Eminem, 2010s with Kendrick Lamar. Like I think just
I was
one of the most iconic music producers of all time.
Absolutely. And again, like even him being on stage at the Super Bowl, it was just like, he's still there. He's still doing it. And I just like a personal tidbit is like before I knew about the Chronic, before I knew about NWA, I remember one of the first rap albums that I actually, and I'm talking as like an 8-year-old who's just buying like an album off like the iTunes store, the Chronic 2001. Even I was still like 7 years late. But when I remember I listened to that because I thought Eminem was like in my head that was like rap. That's what I thought rap was, Eminem and Lil Wayne. And so when I heard the Chronic, I was like, who's this guy though? Like who's Dr. Dre? And that was the first time like, or I forget if I just said the Chronic right there. 2001 was the album that I bought, and it was just like that was my taste of Dr. Dre. And then you start going backwards to the Chronic and Warren G and NWA, and then you I kind of saw his entire career in reverse. And it's just funny because it still was cohesive. If anything, it was almost like taking a certain college course where you kind of just learn things backwards and get more specific and you get like more into the details. So I mean, that's always like, I think Dr. Dre has done so much for each group that he's been in, but then also like he says, he was the one starting careers. He was the one putting people on. I think there's a lot of rappers today that you wouldn't have without Dr. Dre. And that's why like, even the other like Ice Cube and Eazy-E, I want to give them credit. And I think there would be a spot on a top 5 roster for him because like Ice Cube was perhaps one of the most genius writers of this era. And he had his solo career that went, like I enjoyed his solo work. Some people are indifferent, but like I thought his solo career was pretty phenomenal. And then again, as a group member, being part of West Side Connection, like it was a different sound. He kind of evolved groups into new groups. He evolved people into new people. And then Eazy-E, I mean, like, again, I think, any person who is familiar with NWA would almost point him out as the main character. But I think some of it was more personality. I do think some of it was more personality and like his voice and his sound. It was
what he did behind the scenes, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think like obviously you touched on his voice, but that voice is just, in my opinion, the most iconic of the group.
Right. And just like to have a solo album like the way he did, with stuff like No More Questions, like that's again just like that's one of those albums that it's like it transcends the entire.
And then perhaps even his tragic death can also play into his like legacy nowadays.
Yeah. And one thing that I like, again, I'm a student still. I didn't know the come up of the group Bone Thugs, but
yeah,
like he was kind of like it was almost like an episode of Shark Tank. Like Bone Thugs was like pitching to him, hey, we're this group from Cleveland, Ohio, and they would send him demos and they would send him samples like every week until he finally responded. He's like, okay, you guys are tight. Like let's get something going. And then Bone Thugs kind of came up by going out to LA and working with Eazy-E. And so I mean, like we'll get into this later. I don't know if we're gonna have an episode on like Midwest or Ohio rap, but like Bone Thugs was one where it was like it kind of just threw a forest fire into this new desolate region of music. But even all that was stemming from LA influence like Eazy-E. And so that's, again, I think, one of those things that you definitely have to consider. But you're right, on a top 5 scale, I don't think there's anybody who's going to surpass Dr. Dre for what he's been able to do. And like I said, when we put NWA on this starting 5 roster, you got to credit each and every one of them. So, I mean, like Ice Cube had his writing, Eazy-E had his persona, and then even, MC Ren, DJ Yella, like they all had their role to make NWA what it was. And I think without any of them, like it could have fallen off this top 5. So they still get their credit. But I mean, I think if you agree, I think Dr. Dre is number 5.
Yep.
And again, not trying to tie positions, but I think we said Dr. Dre would be, he's like the point guard of this. Like he's the one facilitating. He'll pass the ball to anyone and everyone. He's the one like sparking groups. He's the one making trends. He's the one writing the plays, man. Like he's setting up everything. He's the wizard of LA. And I think like more so than like the solo careers of Kendrick, Tupac, the work of Snoop Dogg, the group work of NWA. I think Dr. Dre is the one who's been so much of a catalyst for literally everything that came out of LA. So I think like there's no way you could write this list.
I mean, almost like 4.5 decades of influence.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he's crossed century lines with his sound now. And again, going back to the original thesis, like LA has its sound of storytelling, and beyond what some people have done, I think again, Dr. Dre has been there from the start. He was still telling these stories through what he was able to put on at clubs as a DJ, as an MC, what he did with NWA, what he did with the Chronic. And that's the other thing we were talking about. Like if you picked out these most pivotal albums of LA, I think people would write Doggy Style. I think people would write All Eyes on Me. I think people would write Straight Outta Compton, which was, in part Dr. Dre's production. But then the Chronic is, some people recognize that as the most prolific LA album to ever come about. So, and I don't know if I agree. Everybody has their different connections with what it means, but or what
perhaps that's a list we can break down another day.
Yeah, we should do it. We should do like a rap map roster of albums. But no, for artists, I think this is a pretty solid list. I think like I said, I was worried this would be the hardest one, but when you break it down like that, like I feel
too many locks.
These 5 spots are like they're too powerful. This is quite the dream team. I definitely had a different comment that I cut off earlier, so I don't know if you remember anything you were going to say, or if I'm just tripping. But
no, I mean, I think we got it.
Yeah, that's about it. But yeah, this has been episode 6 of Banger Broadcast, Rap Map LA. Like now I'm antsy to do New York, so I'm gonna just say the next one we do, let's do New York. So New York sound is definitely going to be. I feel like there's more players that could be put in contention because it's again still intertwined like it has been in LA, but there's different stories. There's different layers to New York sound, I think. So that'll be a good discussion. I think the top 5 might be a little bit more tricky to weasel out, but I mean, next episode I want to go with a banger bracket again. We got a couple of years that are going to be pretty exciting that had a lot of content coming out. So stay posted. We're gonna keep updated on the Instagram. Make sure to check on YouTube, Spotify. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, rate the podcast a 5-star. But besides that, I mean, thank you guys for listening. Anything else, Eric? Or we ready to go?
Nope, all good. Thank you guys for listening.
All right, sounds good.
See you very soon with the next one.
Amen.